Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Steamcraft, and it's from Rock Manor Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. I'm going to have a link at the bottom of your screen now, and also at the end of the video, and down in the description section of the video. That's going to take you to the official Kickstarter page. Find out more information than I could possibly tell you here, and hopefully consider backing the project. Steamcraft is a deck building game for 2 to 4 players. You take control of different factions in this world called Cobalt, and every faction is vying for this resource called Brass, which is just this incredibly valuable power source for all these different kingdoms, and you want to have the most of it of the other players. So you deploy all these different types of units, you make buildings, all these different steampunk inspired characters and employees of your company who are going to give you labor power and construction power to get different types of steam powered cards in order to build up your empire and get brass as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And again, this is a deck building game, so it's all about that efficiency and engine building, which does fit together with that steampunk theme. Now let me go ahead and give you a brief overview of the game with a prototype version of the game. So what you see in the overview may not be final and may change in the final version. Keep that in mind. Then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Steamcraft. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. I have this game set up for a 2-player game. The goal of the game is to get the most brass, which in this case are victory points, at the end of the game. You're going to have a pool of brass tokens. Here I have them in 1s and 5s that are depending on the number of players. So for instance, in a 2-player game, as I have it set up out here, I have a grand total of 60 cubes worth of brass out on the table. Once those are gone, you are going to finish up the round such that each player gets an equal number of turns, and then whoever has the most brass, not only amongst the cubes that they have, but also amongst the cards that they have acquired, because many cards have a brass value, you'll add all those totals together. Whoever has the most brass is going to be the winner of the game. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that this is a deck building game. So if you're not familiar with deck building games, I'll explain the basic premise to you. Basically, each player is going to start off with the same, let's say, inferior deck of starting cards. In this case, each player gets 10 starting cards. I'll explain more about those in a second. And with those 10 cards, you are going to purchase newer and better cards from a lineup of cards, in this case 2 lineups of cards, out in the middle of the table. These cards are strictly better in almost every way than the cards that you start off with. As you buy those cards, you're going to make room for a discard pile next to your deck. So when you buy a card or acquire it in any way, it's going to go directly into your discard pile. Every turn, you're going to draw 5 cards from your deck. And again, depending on the deck building game, that might be different. But in this game, it's 5 cards. And then if you ever have to draw cards, but there are no more cards left in your deck because they're all in your discard pile, you simply reshuffle your discard pile and then keep drawing until you've met the required number of cards that you get to draw. In this way, you are constantly making your deck stronger. In fact, if possible, you want to get rid of permanently some of those weak starting cards or any other cards that you buy during the game that just aren't working for you, so that you can keep your deck trimmed down and therefore be able to draw the cards that you really want more and faster. Now, every deck building game uses something as currency. There's something that you use in order to buy newer and better cards, and this game actually has 2 types of currency. If you look out on the cards that are available for purchase out here in the 2 lineups, the employee lineup and the unit and building lineup, there's 2 different types of currency. You have labor, which is the red symbol, and construction, which is the gear symbol. Some cards require both. Some cards only require one of these things. And speaking more about setup, these 2 lineups of cards are actually called the labor market and the design department. The labor market has nothing but employee cards. The design department has nothing but units and buildings. Underneath the picture, there's a little block of text which will tell you what type of card they actually are. Now, each player, as I mentioned, is going to start off with a starting deck. And in that starting deck of cards, you have, let me show you this real quick. You have 3 union workers. Each one of these, when played, is going to give you 1 construction currency. And then you have 7 clerks, and each clerk is going to give you 1 labor currency to spend. And as I said at the start of the game, you're going to shuffle this up and draw 5 of the cards randomly, and then at the end of every round, after you've played your turn, you're going to draw up to discard whatever cards you haven't played, and then draw back up to 5. Every player also starts off with a mining platform, which will just be in play. Now, this is a building, and buildings in this game, and also units, which is why they're kept in a separate deck, can be destroyed, and units can actually attack and deal damage. And I believe some rare buildings may be able to deal damage as well. But the first number down at the bottom is always how much potential damage it deals in combat, where the second number is the amount of damage it can take before it's destroyed. Any card, a building, or a unit that gets destroyed is going to go into your discard pile. You'll have to draw it again, except for your mining platform. In this case, you actually flip it over into its grayed outside. You can rebuild it for 3 construction value on one of your future turns. But the mining platform gives you the special ability to turn 2 construction into 1 brass. So it's something you can do if you don't have anything else worthwhile to spend your construction on in order to give yourself victory points, essentially. Now, each player is also going to have a reserve deck based on their faction of choice. There's going to be 5 different factions in the main game, and you'll take the deck of reserve cards for that faction and put it face up over to the side. Only you may purchase cards from this pile of cards. There's 2 particular cards. So for instance, this faction here, which is the Frontier Rail faction, they get 2 passenger stations and 3 jetpack couriers. The jetpack couriers are going to cost 1 labor to purchase and are going to give 2 brass. Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, I did not mention this when I was looking at the other cards. There are brass values at the bottom corner of the cards. They give, like, for instance, the jetpack couriers are worth 1 at the end of the game. The passenger station costs you 1 construction, and the special ability, which happens when you put it into play, is that you may demolish this building to gain a labor. This is a building, so it stays in play. It has 1 attack and 2 health, and it's worth 1 point at the end of the game. And actually, the reason I didn't mention before was because your starting cards do not have a brass symbol, which means they are not going to be worth any points at the end. Now, my opponent over here has their own reserve deck, just to show you another one of these and the potential cards that are inside of it. This is the McGlynn Clockworks faction. And the first one here they have is the McGlynn's Gumshoe, which is let special ability draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. And the other thing here, a building, is the Clockworks Factory, which is demolish this building to draw a card. It's a 0/1. So every character is going to have their own particular faction reserve that gives them that only they can buy from, that gives them some distinction from the other players. Now, on your turn, as I said, you're going to be able to buy. Everyone's going to be able to buy cards from the 2 center rows. Every time a card is purchased, it immediately gets replaced by another card from the appropriate deck. So there's always going to be a total of 12 options for players to choose from. Now let me show you some of those cards in a little more detail. These are examples of some of the employee cards. Some of them are just sort of, I'll say basic cards, but still better than the ones you can start off with because they're at least worth a point. And also, like the contractors here give you, for 2 labor, you can get 2 construction when you play them in the future. Or the manager, opposite of that, you pay 3 labor and you get 2 labor when you play him in the future. You have cards for the different factions, like the Pendulum Sniper, which is destroy a unit with 2 or less health, and you gain a labor. Elizabeth Boyd, the CEO, gets you 4 brass, and you can draw a card if you have 3 or more buildings in play, but do note that she costs 5 labor and 2 construction, so she can be kind of hard to purchase. Also, the same with Himiko Ito, which needs 6 labor, but she gains you 4 construction when you play her, and if you acquire a building this turn, you can add it directly into your hand, bypassing your discard pile and the need to draw it again. The Aristocratic Robot is 4 and 4, but gets you 2 labor, 2 construction, and 2 brass when you play him in the future. So very versatile in that regard. Next, I'll show you some of the unit and building cards from the design department. You have the Gauntlet Warrior, which costs you 3, but when played, gains you a construction, and then it has 1 attack and 2 health. The Assembly Line costs you 6, but you may spend a construction as if it were labor. You can swap those 2 currencies, and it's a 1/2. The Steam Engine costs you 1 and 3, but it has no special ability, but it's a powerful 2/3 attack and health. Same thing with the Motorized Run, it's the opposite of that. It's a 3 and 2. And the McGlynn Tower, the last example I'll show you. There's many, many more cards than the ones I'm showing you, but once per turn you may draw a card. It has no attack power, but it has 4 health, so it's really hard to kill, so that can give you an edge. Essentially, you're drawing 6 cards per turn. So let me give you a breakdown of how a turn is going to work in Steamcraft. So the first thing you would do is any kind of things that happen at the start of your turn, but otherwise you're just going to play cards from your hand. So a lot of the times that's just going to be playing cards to accrue as much labor or construction power as you can, and then purchasing cards from the lineup. But then it's going to go to the action phase. Now in the action phase, if you've previously built units and buildings, and they have attack power, you have the opportunity to attack with them. Even if they don't have attack power, you can still technically do it if it's something that you want to do. But you can't attack with them on the same turn that you have put them into play. Same thing with the buildings. The buildings actually, when you put them into play, are going to start off face down, and then they're going to, after you've constructed them, then they're going to be flipped up on the following turn. When you decide to use your units, however, you do have 2 options. One of them is to send them to the mines. If you decide to send them to the mines, then for every attack that they have, they gain you 1 brass point. So that's something you can certainly do. Alternatively, you can choose to attack your opponent's units and buildings. If you choose to do so, the unit and or building who are involved in the combat deal their damage to each other simultaneously. If you manage to destroy a unit or a building, you're going to gain a brass point. If you don't, well, in other words, if you just deal damage but not enough to kill it, and vice versa, then you're going to have to take hit point damage via these little hit point markers, which will stay out there. And if a card is destroyed, it goes into its owner's discard pile, at which point it's going to have to be drawn again in order to be put into play, and you'll have to wait again in order to attack with it. Once you're done with attacks or you really can't do anything else, then it's time to end your turn. Any employee cards that you played are going to go immediately into your discard pile, whereas any units or buildings that you've built that were not destroyed will stay in play. You draw back up to 5 cards, reshuffling as needed, then wait for your opponent to take their turn, and then do it all over again until the pool of brass runs out. Finish out until you have an equal number of turns. Count up all of the brass tokens you've collected with all of the brass value of all the cards that you've purchased during the course of the game. Whoever has the most brass victory points is the winner of the game. That is Steamcraft. Let's get to my final thoughts. Well, as I already mentioned in my overview, Steamcraft has an interesting theme that does work well for the type of game that it is. In a deck building game, you're trying to be as efficient as possible and get your engine going. It is an engine building game, and that does fit well with the theme here. This is one of the types of deck building games that has 2 types of currency, which means there's always different types of things that you want to focus on, because depending on which type of cards you want, you may need different types of currency. And you'll see trends as you go through the design and the labor pools there, and the different cards that are available to you. You always can have these options of different focuses, and there's a lot of different cards to choose from, so you have a lot of different types of variability. What do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on manpower? Do you want to focus on getting as many buildings out as possible? Do you just want to spam getting as much construction power to go mining as much as you possibly can? Or if you choose to go the unit route and get as many attacking units as possible, is it just to keep your opponents in check by taking out their units and buildings and getting brass that way? Or would you rather take them into your mines and use their attack power for that purpose to get as much brass as you possibly can, knowing that if you do that, your opponents are probably not going to let you get away with it for long, and they're going to use their own units to attack you. So this is the constant back and forth of the game. So while there is definitely deck building is like the strong central mechanism here, and you're going to be doing a lot of it, going through your deck, getting out your weak cards, getting new cards, bringing them in, you're also going to be trying to get these different units and buildings out, so that's a whole different focus that a lot of other deck builders don't have, because now it's interactive. Now you're fighting the other players. It can't just be multiplayer solitaire, because you are, even if you want it to be, other players may not let you get away with that. So I think that's an interesting aspect to it, and it does tie together with the theme as well, sort of that cutthroat industry, just always after each other, always constantly trying to edge out your opponents. There's tons of different cards in the game. There's a lot of different employees who all have that steampunk flavor to it. The artwork works really well for what is there in the game, and also you have the decks are very distinct, whereas in most deck builders, everyone starts off on a completely level playing field that's completely the same, I should say, instead of level. In this one, you have different corporations, and those different corporations are going to give everyone just a little bit of a unique feel as you buy from your own personal reserve of cards. So the end result of all of this is that you have a game with a very interesting theme that makes sense for what the game is, but also it is a deck building game with a lot of interesting twists to it, which means that this game is going to appeal to anyone who is a fan of deck building games. Even if you've never played a deck building game before, though, the entry point for this game, the barrier of entry, is very low. It's easy to learn, it's easy to get up and running, games are fast, so you can definitely, even a casual gamer can get into it for that reason, and anyone that enjoys the steampunk theme, especially if they enjoy steampunk themes and deck building games, are really going to be into this. So if you know someone like that, if you are someone like that, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page, because the project is running right now. You can find out more information than I could possibly tell you here. Don't take my word for it. Go there. I'll have a link at the bottom of your screen now, and also in the description section of the video. That'll take you there, and hopefully you'll consider backing Steamcraft from Rock Manor Games. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.